Welcome to this explainer. You probably already know the name, the Donner Party. It's 1846. The goal? California. But man, what starts as this hopeful journey west absolutely devolves into a literal fight for survival, trapped high up in the freezing Sierra Nevada mountains. We're going to unpack exactly how that timeline fell apart, the brutal conditions they faced, and the truly harrowing reality of being stuck in that environment. So, let's just dive right in.
Endless blizzard covering the camp. Complete isolation. Those words perfectly captured the sheer terror of what went down when the sky just opened up. Because this wasn't your typical bad winter storm. It hit shockingly early, we're talking late October, just instantly dumping several feet of snow across the Sierra Nevadas almost overnight. The sheer volume of that snow literally cut these pioneers off from the rest of the world. And it's that feeling, that absolute, impenetrable isolation, that we really need to keep in our minds as we look at how they got trapped in the first place.
Section 1. The perilous journey begins.
Now, the tragic turning point of this whole situation actually happened months before a single snowflake fell. Eager to save time, the group decided to take a supposed shortcut, the Hastings Cutoff. But, as we know, this route through the treacherous mountains and deserts wasn't a shortcut at all. It was a total disaster that cost them absolutely crucial weeks of travel. Because of this massive, fatal delay, by the time they were navigating those icy rivers and rocky mountain paths, they were way behind schedule. So when that relentless snowstorm rolled in during deep winter, those large, heavy wagons were completely trapped. They couldn't move forward, and they definitely couldn't go back.
And that leads us right into Section 2, Trapped by the Blizzard.
Exhausted, the survivors were forced to just stop where they were and set up two desperate winter camps. One was at Truckee Lake and the other at Alder Creek, and their shelters incredibly precarious. Some frantically retrofitted these old dilapidated cabins left by previous travelers, while others just hastily threw together makeshift tents using their wagon canvas as a roof. Can you imagine? Under the crushing weight of that endless, piling snow, these weak wooden and canvas structures were constantly on the verge of collapsing. They were relying on these tiny, flickering campfires that barely fought off the bitter cold, basically plunged into total freezing isolation.
Moving into our third section, Desperation and Impossible Choices.
The crushing reality of that nighttime camp was just dark, silent, and terrifying. The paralyzing fear actually drove a desperate group to take action. Realizing that staying put literally meant certain death, 17 survivors fashioned makeshift snowshoes out of wagon parts and hiked out into the mountains in mid-December. This group became known as the Forlorn Hope. In their chaotic escape attempt, it turned into a brutal 33-day trek. The conditions were virtually unsurvivable. People were collapsing from sheer exhaustion in sub-zero temperatures right there in the deep, unyielding snow.
So you have to ask yourself, what happens when the food disappears entirely and the blizzard just never ends? Well, when all the conventional supplies ran out, survival shifted into something almost completely unrecognizable. To fight off severe starvation, the pioneers resorted to boiling ox hides for days, literally until they turned into this glue-like jelly. They were scavenging for field mice and desperately eating the charred bones of their pack animals just to get any remaining nutrients. Normal human life, as they knew it, completely broke down as they exhausted every possible option just to live one more day.
And that intense starvation forced some truly impossible survival decisions. Staring imminent death right in the face, totally isolated in the dark, the survivors were pushed way past the limits of conventional morality. They turned to the unthinkable, consuming those who had already perished. Now, this wasn't done lightly. It was the absolute last resort. In fact, in some instances, they carefully labeled the remains just to make sure no one would ever be forced to eat their own family members. It's a devastating, profound testament to the extreme depths of human desperation when you're trapped in that kind of freezing, unforgiving void.
Which brings us to Section 4, Rescue and Tragic Aftermath.
The rescue itself was an incredibly perilous, prolonged operation. Just getting up there meant navigating those exact same dangerous snowstorms. The first relief party finally arrived at the frozen shelters in February of 1847, and they stepped into a scene of just unimaginable emotional devastation. But they couldn't just pull all the weak, exhausted survivors out of the wilderness at once. It actually took 4 separate, grueling relief missions spanning across several months to finally extract everyone remaining and guide them safely out of the mountains.
When the last of those relief parties finally left the abandoned camp,
The frozen shelters and wagons just sat there, buried beneath the snow in this haunting, eerie silence. That stark landscape really became a monument to the ultimate cost of their journey. Out of the 87 members of the Donner Party who started out on that hopeful route to California, 41 tragically died in those mountains. Only 46 survived, totally hollowed out by an ordeal that, as we know, continues to echo through history today.
As the endless snowfall continued to cover that empty wilderness, burying what was left of the camp, it leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. Are we ever truly prepared for nature's absolute indifference? Because the mountain didn't care about their wagons, their plans, or their families. It just snowed. I really hope this explainer of the Donner Party tragedy has given you a clearer understanding of that incredibly delicate balance between human endurance and the raw power of the natural world. Thanks for diving into this with me today, and as always, keep exploring the history around us.